I read an excellent article in the New York Times that I want to talk about tonight. It was entitled How China Pulled So Far Ahead on Industrial Policy. And it's an important article because I think it's starting to show the US government, hopefully, is in the early stages of understanding how China has been as successful as it has been, which is completely tied to its success with its industrial policy. So the US response to China so far has been what I would put under a broad heading of containment. So what the US is trying to do is to use tariffs, to use sanctions, and to use other control devices that prevent China from doing what they have been doing to be successful. So I think the hope that I have for this article is that it will start to open the eyes in the US as to what China is actually doing in a way that will enable the US to compete with China as opposed to contain China. So if you look at China's industrial policies, they're really not very mysterious. They're actually what any good major global corporation does all the time, which is to look at what are the major external forces at work and the trends. Where is the world heading 10 years, 15, 20 years from now? What do we need to invest in terms of skills and competencies today to be successful then? And then how do we marshal the resources, both talent and economic resources, that will enable us to actually deliver against our goals? And that's what China has done. And maybe the best example is what they've done in EVs. If you look at China's automobile industry and go back 10 to 15 years ago, it was virtually non-existent. So China basically started a 10 to 15-year program to identify what battery technology was going to prevail, and it was lithium. They bought up lithium mines wherever they could. They attracted the best talent from corporations, from the government, and from universities, and aligned them against the key tasks that had to be delivered against for the initiative to be successful. And here we are 10 to 15 years later, and China, from a standing start of almost zero in the automobile industry, is now accounting for over 60% of all EVs sold globally. What my hope is that the US will understand that has nothing to do with cheating. That has everything to do with competence. So my hope is basically that the US looks at what China has actually done, understands that it's replicable, and it will apply not only to EVs and to renewable energy and to quantum computing, but it's also going to apply to AI, and it's going to apply ultimately to biotech and a number of the most advanced technologies. It's going to be very difficult for the US, though, on a couple of dimensions. One, China has been executing industrial policies for the last 25 years. So getting coordination between all of the resources, whether it's universities or private companies or startups or ministries of the government, is something that takes a lot of skill and a lot of time to develop. The second strength that China has that's extremely important is it's a top-down driven education system. So if you look at the net result, China is producing more STEM students today. We have a totally decentralized education system in the US that is not producing top-tier scientific students. And if the US doesn't change that, it's going to be very difficult to compete long-term with China. My hope for the US is that we put aside containment because it's a false avenue. We recognize that we are competing against someone who is very strong and has natural strengths. So I'm encouraged by this article because it was a very honest portrayal of what China has done to win. And it should be a great wake-up call in the US. But unless the US starts becoming more clear-eyed about what it is that China is doing to be successful, the notion that we're going to ultimately contain them and prevail on that dimension is a ridiculous hope. It's not going to happen.